folks, my name is Nathan Keep. I'm a product agronomist for Pioneer Seed Company in south central Nebraska. Today, I'm joined by our Pioneer Field Agronomist team to discuss the recent hail events which have affected so many producers. Everyone is aware that the more time you can allow for a field to recover, the better you are capable of assessing the damage, plant recovery, and remaining yield potential. Unfortunately, this year producers are under pressure from the calendar. We simply are running out of time for replanting. What we want to provide for you today is a methodology for assessing hail-damaged corn and beans and putting some type of estimated yield potential on damaged fields. I should note, the methodology we will present is not representative of any official hail adjustment process utilized by insurance providers. What we present today is based on the collective experience of our field agronomist team, having worked with the producers in the past. First up will be Bill McClure showing us how to assess a damaged soybean field.
Hi folks, Bill McClure, field agronomist in east central Nebraska with some information on assessing hail damaged soybeans. Now the first step in assessing hail damaged soybeans is to determine the population of remaining soybean plants that are viable and healthy. Now in order to do this, I need to examine individual soybean plants and determine if the growing points remain or if hail has damaged the beans beyond recovery. Consider that soybeans literally are different than corn in that they have multiple growing points from which they can regenerate new growth. These individual plants are capable of generating new branches from any node which can develop into a main stem whenever the dominant stem is lost in a situation just like this. So leaf tissue is important for regrowth, and injured plants with the equivalent of one cotyledon or one leaf have a good chance of recovery. If no leaves remain though, even though the growing point is viable, regrowth will be very slow, and we've seen some of this already. An important assessment to be made is to determine if the plants have suffered significant stem bruising. We've got a couple plants here that you can see the difference, and the stem bruising can be significant. Soybeans can withstand heavy stem bruising and remain viable all season long. However, yield potential can suffer, and then lodging becomes a real threat.
So Bill, what are you telling producers about what kind of populations would you leave in a soybean field that's been damaged by hail?
Yeah, I think, John, there's a lot of different theories on what we should leave or what we shouldn't. The real thing is, when you look at the calendar now, we're kind of down to D-Day, and if we can muster up, 60, 65,000 halfway uniform plants out there that are generally healthy, I think at this stage you'd probably tend to let them run.
I like the uniformity of 65, 70,000. I agree. And I tell a few producers on the wide rows, the 36-inch rows I run into a lot, maybe a little thicker than that, just because they can't compensate as much. So how do you go about determining if one of these is viable and one of these that's been broken off, and are they both going to have the same yield potential?
Well, probably not great examples here because these are both good-looking plants in this field. But you notice we've got cotyledon leaves attached. There's growing points at each one of those little nodes. This little plant here had the cotyledons knocked off, but as you can see, after a week's time, it regenerated quite nicely. And to me, this is a viable plant, so I would definitely count it. Of course, you'd count this. Now, the one thing we do need to talk about is where those fields got bruised down below that cotyledon and stem. The stem is really ratted up.
I was just going to ask, here's one of those plants that's been cut off. The
about
growing point is viable, so this guy's going to come back to life, but he's got a pretty significant stem bruise down there. So I guess when I'm looking at fields like this, I want to find that 60 to 70,000 plants that don't have this deep stem bruising. I like to tell growers, I've watched these over the years, they remain viable most of the year. They can produce upwards of normal yield, but you should really anticipate a lot of lodging out of that, kind of late July into August time frame. I don't know, would you tell me anything different?
They look good right now, and you think, oh, let's go for it, but literally they'll get big and bushy later on, and I'm afraid they're going to break over. So those are the things you got to consider.
Hi, I'm Gabe Bathman, Pioneer Field Agronomist in central Nebraska. Today I want to share some soybean replanting considerations for any producers faced with replacing hail-damaged fields. To start, we highly recommend staying with your normal soybean maturities. Across central and eastern Nebraska, this would be your 2.5 to 3.3 maturity beans. With late planting, soybeans generally don't achieve their normal plant height. For this reason, you don't want to change to earlier maturity soybeans. When it comes to planting rates, I recommend increasing seeding rates by about 10%. This helps compensate for reduced plant height in a shorter growing season. Another thing to consider is a good seed treatment. Some may be surprised to know that seedling attacking pathogens often show up in these situations. When it comes to yield expectations, we feel that late planted soybeans in our area will be around 80% of normal. So if you normally produce yields 75 to 80 bushel per acre range, expect replanted beans to fall somewhere in that 55 to 60 bushel per acre. One other thing to think about too is to consider chemistry options. Enlist gives us the flexibility to spray through R1, whereas the Extend label cuts us off much sooner. Of course, herbicides that have already been sprayed will dictate the options you have. I hope that you find this information helpful, and please, under any circumstance, please reach out to your local Pioneer rep for any specific questions you have on your